What's up, faithful? Welcome to Niners Central. Today we're going to be talking about the Eagles and 49ers wildcard game. I'm going to be going over the injury report, who's currently listed questionable on both teams, and we're going to go in and see who we might think is going to win this game. And hopefully it's our Niners, because I don't want to see the Eagles win this game, and quite frankly, I don't like the Eagles. I think their fan base sucks. So, right now, Trent Williams, Ricky Pearsall, Keon White, D. Winters, Luke Gifford, Renardo Green, and Jacob Cowing are all dealing with some sort of injuries. They're listed as questionable. Trent Williams looks like he might have the best shot at coming into play for this game. At this point, I don't think Ricky Pearsall is coming back. That dude might as well just be made of glass, and I don't know how long he's going to last on this team if he can't get on the field, because, you know, I was just watching the freaking Bucks documentary on, I think it was Amazon Prime, and I was listening to this, and they mentioned that Rondé Barber, when he was with the Buccaneers in their, I think, was it the 2003? Yeah, the 2003 game that they had against the Eagles, that dude was playing with a torn PCL. He was playing with a torn PCL in that game. And Ricky Pearsall can't even play with a sprained PCL. That should tell you a lot about him and his character. So, not even going to get into the freaking Brandon Ayuk, because that dude, at this point, we're just waiting for the offseason so he can get the heck off the team. Let me check my notes here real quick, and let's see. The roster moves for the Niners. Tatum Bethune was placed on IR. We already knew that. Eric Kendricks was signed to the active roster, and he's probably going to be staying there for a while, at least as long as we're in the damn playoffs. Kazir White was also signed to the practice squad, but I would expect him to be on the 53-man roster going into this game. I seriously doubt that they're going to trust any of the linebackers after the game against Seattle. No. I think they're going to promote him to the 53-man roster prior to this game. They should. So I think that will help bolster the defense. I don't think that they're going to be the missing pieces, but they are going to be better than what we have currently on linebacker, even the rookies, because you going up against the Eagles and you got rookie linebackers. Even if they are good, they're going to fall for some trickery. They're going to fall for the misdirections, the snap count. It's happened all year. We've all seen it. And while they might be fast in terms of sideline to sideline speed, we've all seen that our linebacking core, including our secondary, they tend to struggle when it comes to wrapping up and tackling. You know, you think that if you're playing since Pop Warner, and I know most of these dudes probably have been playing since Pop Warner, that's a fundamental. You know, you learn how to wrap up and tackle. You know, at least when I played football back in high school, that was our fundamental. You wrap up and tackle. And if you didn't wrap up and tackle, then, you know, you were running laps around the freaking track. So, you know, so hopefully we can get also Fred Warner back for the NFC Championship game if we make it that far. So, not trying to be a negative Nancy on this one, but it's a tough task. It's a really, really tough task. At this point, the 49ers might as well just be playing with most of their defense in the ER. They might as well just have an ER at their stadium, because the way that Kyle Shanahan runs his offense and his defense, you know, they have such intense practices that a lot of them end up with these soft tissue injuries, you know, hamstrings, sprains, things like that. I mean, you don't see too many major injuries, and it usually happens like every few years. You know, Bosa tore his ACL or somebody's tearing some freaking Achilles, or you have a broken ankle, and that's part of the game. When you're in game and it's happening, it's hard to control those. But when you got players throughout your off season and practice coming down with hamstring injuries and coming down with sprains and stuff like that, that has nothing to do with their injuries and being able to hold up. That has to do with the intensity of their practice. And at least based on what I've been able to find out, his practices are really, really intense. He doesn't go for short, or not short, but he goes for short, intense practices and tries to avoid doing the long practices. And a lot of the NFL teams, they will go for a longer stretch of time or just practice multiple times a day, less intense, but more time on the field. And that's why you see a lot of teams that are successful, they don't get as many injuries because they're not practicing as intensely. And I remember in the offseason, Kyle was saying that, we're going to practice as hard as we can. And if we get used to it, we'll build callus, and we should be used to it. Well, Kyle needs to change that, because clearly building callus is not working, and all you're doing is putting your dang players on ER. At this point, it looks like a freaking emergency ward. So we'll see how that goes, and let's move on. Let's see. The big one so far for the Eagles, who I was paying attention to, was Lane Johnson. I think he's the right tackle for the Eagles. He was full practice earlier this season, or earlier this week. And he's currently limited again with his foot. So I don't mind that. I'm not trying to wish injuries off on players, but if, he doesn't participate, or if he struggles because of it, that's better for us. Jalen Carter is also dealing with a hip. Nakobe Dean is dealing with his hamstring. Marcus Epps is still on concussion protocol, and I don't think that's going to change. He's probably not coming in for this game either. And Dallas Goedert was limited. So it looks like he's probably going to play too. So that's probably going to be an issue. And the thing that I'm seeing right now is I don't think that they're going to run the ball as much as everyone is saying they're going to. If it were me, seeing the linebackers that they have, Kazir White and Eric Kendricks, they're tackling machines. They might be 33 years old and 29 years old, and the sideline speed might be missing, because the last time they had a full season was about a year ago. Not this year, but previous year. So they might be missing that sideline speed. But, in terms of rushing forward and being able to stop the run, I do think that they'll be capable of doing that. And I really think that it's going to come down to passing, because you look at their Eagles receivers, and right there that's their biggest strength. You got Dallas Goedert, and their third string receiver. He runs a 4.4, and perfect when it comes to his in breaking routes and being able to move quickly. He's got pretty good agility. So, that's probably where it's going to come down to. And given that the 49ers defense has significantly struggled with stopping the run, there's not a whole lot of film on Kazir White and Eric Kendricks under Robert Saleh for the Eagles to be able to manage to find and develop a plan around them. And Kazir White is pretty much, all they have is tells. They know how he plays, but how Robert Saleh uses him is going to be completely different than how the Eagles used him. So I do think they're going to try to target our linebackers in terms of passing, They're probably going to be doing a lot of screens, short passes, but I do think they're going to try to pass. I don't think it's going to be a smart move for them to try to run. You know, when we played the Colts, I think Jonathan Taylor, they held him to 16 rushes, 46 yards. He's the third leading rusher in the league. And I get it. You know, people are going to say the Seattle game and, you know, we played like trash there. But, you know, Seattle is a whole different beast. It's a division game. And division games usually come down to stuff like that. It's going to happen because they know each other a hell of a lot more than, say, the Eagles and the 49ers do. We don't play against them as often. And Dallas Goedert and their third string receiver, it's going to definitely come down to those two in terms of them trying to pull the safeties up. And if our safeties get pulled up to try to stop those shorter routes, then they're going to take their shots deep. I have a feeling it's going to be that way. As for the Niners, you know, trying to get out of their defense, the Eagles' defense, there are some weaknesses there. Their defensive tackle, they run a 4-3. Vic Fangio usually uses a cover 4, but their defensive tackle has struggled with double teams. And if we could run down the middle, and not always with CMC, because I'm hoping they give Robinson some freaking time at running back, because I really do think that in terms of running down the center, you know, in between the right and left guard, I think you're probably going to have your best bet in terms of running. Going sideline to sideline, you know, with the Eagles defensive ends, no. I wouldn't do that. But we'll have to see how Kyle does things, because Kyle's usually a freaking stickler for sticking to his 21 personnel, even when, you know, he should be using 2 tight ends, you know, 12 personnel. But hey, what the heck do we know? We're just watching the game and watching them get their ass kicked by Seattle. So hopefully that can change moving into this game. I do think that Seattle game, I don't think that he was actively trying to win that game. Just my personal opinion, based on the last 5 weeks prior to that. You know, the offense was humming. It was scoring points, putting up yardage, and the play calling was amazing. And then suddenly you get into this Seahawks game, and it's just about as vanilla as you can get. And I do think that maybe he's like, okay, you know, we're 7-2 on the road. We're 7-2 on the road. Yes, sorry about that. That's my correction. And 5-3 at home. So where do you want to play? I know people are going to be like, oh, home field advantage. Well, you know what? We're the faithful. We take over every stadium. So every stadium is our home. So we can go on the road and win while we're 7-2. So I do think that we have an opportunity to win in Philly. And I think it's going to come down to taking advantage of the Eagles' weaknesses right now that I'm seeing. It's being able to double team their defensive tackle. I don't think that we're going to be doing a whole lot of screens, but I do think that George Kittle should be used to block a little bit more in this game than typical, because the Eagles have done a pretty damn good job at, you know, containing tight ends. They've done a really good job at that. So I think, especially with Jacob Cowing coming back, he's been activated off IR, and they've had him limited, but I do think he's going to play. And I think if Kyle can allow him to take the field, and even if he doesn't get the ball, even if he's not the main target on the offense, you know, his speed alone warrants the defense to look at him, and Philly will look at him and keep him under wraps, even if they have to shade some of their safeties towards that direction. And if I were Kyle, I would take a few deep shots at him. Whether he makes those catches or not doesn't really matter. Preferably, we'd all like him to make those catches, but the point is that you want the Eagles looking at him and being like, okay, cool, this guy's the fastest player they got. If we don't guard him, then he could potentially blow the top off of our defense, and it's going to be, at this point, it's going to be like a gunfight in the OK Corral. You're going to end up with a shootout. So I do hope that we run the ball, but at the same time, it needs to be balanced, and you do need to see a lot more of the playbook being opened up. You cannot have this vanilla offense that we had against Seattle. And like I said, I think he threw that game. I don't think he was actually trying to move down the field as quickly or be as aggressive as he was in the previous 5 weeks. Because if you look at that last drive, the second to the last drive they moved down the field fairly quickly and they were passing. And that led me to think that Kyle was keeping that playbook under wraps. He knew, okay, if we get the number 1 seed, we're probably not winning. That's just my personal opinion. I'm pretty sure he knows that too. I don't think the Niners would win if they were the number 1 seed. I think they'd probably get the doors blown off of them either by Seattle or the Rams or whoever the heck is there, but I don't think we would have won at home. Now, on the road, that's another thing entirely. I think with this loss, it pushes the Niners into a position where they're like, okay, we had a 5-game stretch where we were winning. We thought we were thought we were coming to a groove, that we were the best team coming in to week 18, and Seattle proved them wrong. They lost. But there's a silver lining to it. While the Seahawks defense was really good in that game, the Seahawks offense was just atrocious. And the fact that it was 13-3 probably should have been more like 26-3. But the fact that we held them to that many points, the fewest points, mind you, all season. They haven't had that few points all season. And that was from our defense, who was rolling in on freaking stretcher beds and crutches and God knows what else. That's an upside. At this point, people typically don't want to say this because they see where this team ended up, and they're like, no, that can't be. They're not the same thing. The 2007 Giants, they were in a similar position. Struggled all year, had injuries at linebackers. Their secondary was really young, full of rookies. Defensive line was beat up, and they're going into Wildcard weekend against the Bucs with literally just players that were rolling in off the couch. And boom, Super Bowl champions. I see the parallels there, and I think they can make a run. Does our offense need to step up? Does Kyle need to step up? Yes, I think he does. I think he really has a lot to prove this season, because if he can't do it with the superstars that he had in previous years, he has to prove that he can do something now. He has to show, okay, I'm a genius at play calling. I can do this. But he has to get out of his own way. He has to get out of his own way, because every year it's just an excuse as to why he can't win the big one. There's always some damn excuse. And, obviously we've had bad luck against the damn Chiefs. But at some point in time, you need to get over that hump. You need to get over that hurdle. And he needs to win this. He needs to win it this year. At least that's my opinion. I think he does need to win it this year. So let's see. So when you look at the Eagles offense, right? The Eagles offense, 78.2% of the time, they're running a shotgun. They're most of the personnel package that they use is 11 personnel with sometimes pushing 12 personnel. And under center, when you see Jalen Hurts under center, 95% of the time it's going to be a run. So there are things that the Niners can take advantage of. There's things that the Niners can do to stop the Eagles' offense. They're not an unbeatable team. They've been beat on multiple occasions by teams that they should have just demolished, especially if they're the Super Bowl damn champions. So can we win this game? Yeah. Because I'm seeing it here. This is my first video, and doing my research, I've been doing this stuff like all week, trying to look at what things we can find. But, like I said, under center, if they're under center, 95% of the time they're running. If they're in shotgun, they can run, they can pass. That's probably why they stick in that, because it doesn't really give them a whole lot of tells. But, they're obviously going to be studying this a hell of a lot more than I am. Right now, the biggest issue that I see with the 49ers is our secondary. They're extremely young. And, the Eagles, they have A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Jahan Dotson on top of freaking Dallas Goedert. That's going to be a tough package to stop. So, I don't know. I think it can be a shootout. I don't think either defense is really going to do much in terms of being able to stop either offense. But I think if it comes down to a passing match between Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy, I think Brock's got it. I know people sit there and constantly freaking tell you that, he's a system quarterback or he's overrated, doesn't deserve the money he got. Well, that's not our choice. He got the money he got because he made the Super Bowl, 2 NFC championship games, and he's done fantastic since he's been here. Obviously, he's had some injury problems, the last few years, and that's unfortunate. But injuries are a part of the game, and we will have to see how this game goes. And right now, let's see. Yeah, and so the defensive tackle that they have, I know I should have mentioned his name earlier, but Jordan Davis, he does struggle with double teams. And the point for our offense to do is to get Philly out of the cover 4. If we can get them out of cover 4 and into cover 1 or cover 3, then we can definitely score some points and probably beat Philly. So Kyle's really going to have to open up his playbook. Can't stress that enough. He's going to have to open up his playbook. I do think Jacob Cowing needs to play in this game. Kyle's going to have to get out of his own way. And regardless of whether he can block or not, he needs to be on the field because of his speed alone warrants that the Eagles have to look at him and have to cover him and keep an eye on him. Receivers with speed like that, and we've all experienced this when we play the freaking Rams, if you don't keep an eye on their fastest receivers, then they're going to blow the damn top off your defense, and we've seen it when we play the Rams. Our secondary has just been torched by receivers who are running in between 4.3 and 4.4. So we need to limit those explosive plays also by the Eagles because they're going to have them. We need to try to limit them as much as possible. And I've heard John Chapman say this quite a bit, and shout out to him. He's awesome. If you guys don't watch him already, go watch him, his channel. I watch him. He's the reason why I'm doing this. I know I've messed up a little bit in this video, but this is my first time doing this. This game is not going to be easy. Not even remotely. I hope it is. I hope we have an easy time with it. Praying on that one. My fingers crossed. But, you know, given that our backs are against the wall right now, and that's how I view it, you know, their backs are against the wall. They don't have their superstars. Brock is working with whatever he has, CMC, Robinson. I really do wish that they'd get, who is freaking Isaac Guerrero. I really wish they'd get him on the offense. You don't necessarily need to have him as a damn running back, but given his speed and size, like, why in the hell wouldn't you use that? The dude runs a 4.3. He's 200 pounds. Who the hell's gonna get into his way? Put him as a slot receiver. Put him as a receiver. Put him at something. But get him on the field so you can take advantage of the ability for him to be able to create explosive plays. He's not the best at blocking yet. But do I think he has potential? Hell yeah, I do. We all saw it last season. How many explosive plays he added to the team. And that's what this is lacking. And I love CMC, you know, but he's getting older. And he doesn't have the explosiveness that he used to have. I mean, I don't really think he really had a great top speed. And we all see it, you know. He can't break them long, like, you know, home run plays. You want a running back who, if he finds that hole and he is out in the open field, that, you know, the defense ain't catching up. And CMC, he'll break like a 30 or 40 yard run, but, you know, you're going to end up having somebody chase him down before he gets to the end zone. And it's that right there that we're missing. And that's what Debo brought. And I don't know, Debo was struggling towards the tail end of his time with us, but, you know, Ayuk, Debo, that's what they brought. They brought the ability to make the big play. And that's what this offense is missing. They're missing the ability to make big plays when it matters. And you're relying on Brock to have to turn something out of nothing. And, you know, we all wanted to see that. I know I did. You know, I always support whoever the hell is behind center. I don't care. I'm not freaking going to sit there and say that he's not a good quarterback. I think he is a good quarterback, and I think he's only growing. Will he have struggling points? Yeah, like any quarterback has. You know, you don't look at Tom Brady and say, yeah, that dude didn't struggle, because he had years where he struggled too, even after winning a Super Bowl. Won 3 Super Bowls, and there was a big gap between the next set of 3 Super Bowls that they won. Even he struggles. Peyton Manning struggled within the first few years that he was in. Eli struggled. There's not one quarterback that has ever played the game that can say they have not struggled. Because they all have. Joe Montana won in 81 and struggled 82, 83, and then they didn't get back until 84. And then I think that was where they beat Miami. And then you see them struggling again. And then that's when they get back, and they're 88, 89, they're winning. And then again, 90, they get beat by the Giants. 91, they get beat again. 92, quarterbacks come out injured and they get beat again. And the next time we see him in the Super Bowl is 94 with Steve Young. I mean, in my opinion, I think they should have kept Montana, because you probably would have at least gotten to 2 or 3 more Super Bowls and probably won at least 2 more. But, you know, that's neither here or there. That's people's opinion. But I think Brock can be a great quarterback when given the opportunity. And if you as a head coach and a team are not actively trying to build around him to give him the best shot to win, you're failing. You are failing. Like, I don't want to hear freaking excuses about, oh, he doesn't have, you need to win a game without having your weapons on, all this crap. No, screw that. This ain't Madden. You know, this is real life sports. And if you as a head coach and as an organization are not actively trying to put the best weapons around your quarterback to give him the best shot at winning a title, you ain't got no place being in a damn Super Bowl. Because this whole concept of, you know, a team coming out of nowhere with nobody players and winning a Super Bowl, That's rare. That's extremely rare. It doesn't happen often, and it usually, like, you know, you look at the Patriots. Nobody knew who their players were. Even when I was watching, I didn't know who they were. And when they won, everybody knew who they were. You're not going to be able to mirror that model. Not all 32 teams can do that. Otherwise, if they could, the fucking Browns would be in the playoffs. The Lions would have already won a damn Super Bowl by now. So, you know, we'll see how this goes, and I do hope we end up getting into Dub City. Let's get this win for the Bay. Faithful then, faithful now. Our quest for 6 is going to be here until we finally win one. Peace out, faithful.